Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. My name is Karuna Avatara Das. This is Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. With me is my dear co-host, Jaya Jagannath Prabhu, as well as our most esteemed special guest for this special event on Arise, Hari Parshad Prabhu. We're immensely grateful to him for joining us for this, what promises to be a really profound discussion on a very contentious subject matter. We feel that this discussion is very timely, and we're very happy to bring it to you and to share it with you. I'll hand over to Jaya Jagannath Prabhu. He has a few things to say. He'll introduce Hari Parshad Prabhu properly, and then we will commence.
Okay, before we begin, I have a little message that I got this morning about our podcast from a lady, and it's very well timed. So I wanted to share it as part of a protection because the subject matter is sensitive today. Here's the message. Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Prabhupada. As someone who didn't grow up with a father and who was raised by a single mom, I just wanted to say thank you for starting the Arise Men's podcast. It's really wonderful to know that more and more men are trying to help each other become good men, good husbands, and eventually good fathers. Blessings, which we need, and Haribo. So
Jai.
It was very wonderful to wake up to this message this morning. I also have 4 disclaimers here. I wrote them down because I was scared of forgetting one of them, and they're all important. So disclaimer number 1 about today's episode is didn't know it was Women's International Day, or International Women's Day. Totally didn't know that. Totally didn't set this episode up for that particular day. This has been a topic that's been in the works since we started Arise some 3 or 4 months back. And we were trying to get a scholar on the show to talk about this subject matter. So it's taken us this long, and Hari Parshad, who's a dear friend and brother, happened to have time just on this day. And so we did it, but totally didn't know it was International Women's Day. So that wasn't like part of the setup. That just happened to be the case. That's disclaimer number 1. Disclaimer number 2, this episode is not meant for like moralizing and kind of making innuendos or suggestions about the way women should be. We're not trying to establish any moral imperatives for anyone. What we're trying to do is just get an understanding, because most modern devotees, postmodern devotees, we have a tendency to critique or defend issues that come up in shastra without actually really understanding them. And when it comes to the social structure of things, it's very hard to understand it because we have no personal experience of such a social culture, especially in the Western worlds. So this episode is about understanding, seeing the wisdom of some of these ideas and maybe the implications, especially on the impact on the minds of men. That's the purpose of this episode. We're not trying to moralize. We're not trying to make any suggestions about what we think as men, women should be doing. That's disclaimer number 2. Disclaimer number 3, we invited Hari Parshad not as a man, but as a scholar. So like I said, we're looking for a scholar who can dispassionately deal with the subject matter and just give us let us know what this topic was about. This is this and this is that, in a very sort of dispassionate way. We were looking for a scholar. Hari Parshad has graciously agreed to do so. So we didn't invite him on the show as a man, but we invited him as a scholar. And if you shall ask, well, where are the women scholars who could have dealt with this subject matter? Disclaimer number 4, we have an episode on Tuesday, which is our normal time for doing the podcast, where we'll have a panel of ladies to respond to this particular show and give their own insights to some of the same questions that you hear on today's show. I think those are pretty good disclaimers. It covers a lot of bases. Please don't kill us. Please, socially on the Facebook or whatever. This is meant to be an honest discussion, particularly on the impact of some of the archetypes we encounter in scriptures of women and how that impacts the minds of men. Does it impact them negatively, or what happens there? Thank you for allowing me those disclaimers. And now Hari Parshad Prabhu, thank you so much for coming. Hari Parshad is, he's a Sanskrit poet and scholar, which anyone who follows him on Facebook can easily see the amazing work that he puts out. He's a contributor to the fortnightly Krishna Katamrita Sindhu Pindu, which puts out wonderful articles about bhakti and every Akadashi, every fortnight. He also is an amazing, I don't like to use the word preacher, like propagandist. He's a distributor of happiness in the form of Harikatha. That's the only way I can think of it. And I guess most importantly for me, he's like a friend and brother. I met him in Jagannath Puri, I think almost 3 years ago now, and just over 3 years ago. And somehow I'll never forget when you sat next to me in Prasadam, you appreciated me for my dancing and singing. And you said, I wish I was a little bit more artistic. And I was feeling a little proud about that. And then you gave your presentation on, I think it was on the Gundicha Marjanam pastime. And I was completely blown away by your scholarship. And I was like, wait a minute, you can be a scholar and be humble and nice? What? Really? Like, 'cause I wasn't experiencing that so much. And it kind of inspired me in devotional scholarship, which I was losing a little faith in because I was seeing a lot of devotional scholars seem to go way off the mark. Since then, your presence in my life personally has been extremely impactful. So I'm just so happy to have you here, Hari Prashad. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Prabhu, for kindly inviting me. And I'm very happy to have such a nice brother and friend like you and Karuna Avatar Prabhu. And I would like to begin by saying that it's very nice to have a friend like Jaya Jagannath Prabhu, because his name is Jaya, and it is said, Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. After glorifying Lord Narayan, Nara, Devi Saraswati, Vyasdev, one should glorify Jaya. So I take it as Jai Jagannath Prabhu. But I have one complaint, Prabhu. It's been going on in my mind for a few days, and it's because the topic is somewhat controversial. So we'll start by lightening up the mood, Prabhu. So I have one complaint, Prabhu, that nowadays in these online calls, the person who is invited is offered nothing, Prabhu, not even a garland. What to do about it, Jai Jagannath Prabhu? Should we do something about it?
We can try.
Yes. Do you have a garland, Prabhu, with you?
I only have the garland of my heart, which I can offer. I know it doesn't Prabhu. Count for much.
Okay, Prabhu. So, Prabhu, please mentally visualize, offering a garland to me, in your heart, and hopefully I'll be able to receive it from my end, Prabhu, if Krishna is merciful enough. Thank you, Prabhu, for
Wow. Jai.
We'll see more and more of this sweetness from Hari Prashad. He's just like a walking rasgulla. You just press a little bit, the juice comes out. But okay, let's get into the subject matter. Again, the interest of this subject matter is just the seeking of understanding of a topic that has become increasingly contentious over the years as the social politics of the world have become more and more zoomed in on these sorts of sticky social issues. So the image of women in shastra. I think the first question that I have for you, which I think is important, is that when you read scripture, it appears that the language of scripture is directed at men. And although sometimes you will find distinction between, like, they'll say something about man needs to be careful about woman, and woman also needs to be careful by man. Largely, the language appears to be directed at men, which speaks something to the culture maybe of how education was distributed. And so I guess the first question is, A, is this true? And if it is true, why is it true?
Okay. So the first question is yes, Prabhu.
I just want to amplify that very briefly by just saying that it also seems to be that women only have value relative to men, basically, and that they have no independent value. So it's, in addition to being kind of excluded from being spoken to by shastra, their only value fits in relative to men.
Yes, which comes up again, but yeah, exactly.
Right. So this comes up very frequently in discussion of shastra, because in most of the shastra we see that the speaker are men and the listeners are also men. And most Vedic statements also, they are specifying what is known as masculine gender. Whenever they are specifying anything to do, any vidhi, any prescription is being specified in masculine gender. So a very common question arises that what is the adhikar, what is the role of women, and do Shastra speak something towards women, or are only men addressed in Shastra? So this entire topic has been taken up in great detail by none other than Jaimini Rishi and Vyasadeva. So they are discussing in Mimamsa. There is a separate section in Mimamsa dealing on this topic as to why is it that so many Vedic statements are addressing only the men, not the women. So there is a very classic statement in the Vedas. This statement says Swarga Kamo Yajeta. Swarga Kamo Yajeta means one who is desirous of Swarga, or one who is desirous of heaven, that person should execute a Vedic sacrifice. Now I'm showing this screen in front of us. See here, I want to highlight Swarga Kamo Yajeta. So anybody who is desirous of Swarga, Yajeta, he should execute a Vedic yajna. So here, Swarga Kamaha is masculine. Vyasadeva takes this one sample and says Swarga Kamaha is masculine. He who is desirous of Swarga or heaven should execute a Vedic yajna. Now the question raised by Jaimini is, does it mean that ladies are not eligible for conducting a fire sacrifice? And Vyasadeva, who is the guru of Jaimini, he gives a reply by saying Jatim tu Badarayano Avisheshat. It says it is specified as the entire genus. Whenever masculine is specified in Shastra, the entire genus or the entire Manushya Jati or the entire species of humankind is indicated. For example, if Shastra says Brahmano na hantavya, don't kill a Brahmana, does it mean that one can kill a Brahmani? So the commentators are giving this example. Another example, he said on the 10th day one should give name to a child, masculine child, male child. Does it mean that one should not give name to a girl? So obviously Sri Vyasadeva is specifying, this is, I am giving a reference, this is Mimamsa Sutras, 6th chapter, first pada, 9th sutra. It says Jatim tu Badarayano Avisheshat. Avishesha. Whenever masculine statements are found, one has to understand that they are avishesha, they refer to a general category of human beings. And previously this was the norm. In many religious texts you will find he, but that he also includes she. And Vyasadeva gives another important rule, Falotsaha Visheshatu. He says, if shastric statements are aimed only at men, then does it mean that women don't have the desire to attain Swarga or heaven? And if women have the desire to attain Swarga, Fal Utsaha, the desire to attain the result of Swarga or liberation or any result promised in Shastra. So if women have that desire, and Veda is known as Nigama Kalpataru, desire fulfilling tree, then will Vedas not give any facility for attaining their desires? So definitely Vyasadeva says, whenever Shastra speaks to men, it also automatically includes women, especially in all the vidhis, in all the prescriptive statements that are given in the Shastra. So that is the first answer that is to be given to such a query. So I hope that is the with reference I am giving, so that those who are doubtful about these things should note it down. They should verify all the references. They should check if they were translated properly. And then only they should be convinced. Because true conviction is through pratyaksha praman, by verifying personally. So all the references have been given.
Right.
Okay.
This leads to a follow-up question that's maybe somewhat of an...
Just briefly, Hari Parshad Prabhu, can you just repeat where that conversation between Jaimini Rishi and Vyasadeva is recorded?
Yes, Prabhu. I will once again share it. This is, there are the 6th chapter, the first part 9th sutra, and 6th chapter first part 13th sutra. Both, one should see in Jaimini's Mimamsa sutras. These sutras should be seen by anyone who is interested in this subject matter.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Am I back? My internet connection is a little funny.
You're with us.
Okay. So this leads to a follow-up question that may be somewhat of an aside, but the question is, it seems that culturally there was a distinction in education between men and women. And like when you hear about the Gurukula, it seems like men were sent to the Gurukula, but it's not clear to me from the shastras that we have access to in our movement that was the same was true for women. So there's a distinction in education. Is this true, and why? I guess this is one of the more contentious points today, because men and women receive similar education. I even think I remember in Prabhupada's Leela when he gave second initiation to the men, and I think it was Mother Gaurangi, or maybe I can't say Mother. We're going to come to that soon. But she complains that Prabhupada, why have you given second initiation to the men and not to the women? And Prabhupada makes some comment about the difference in education. And Gaurangi says, well, in the West, men and women receive the same education. So, and then Prabhupada said, okay. And then he gave second initiation, like he was very, very liberal in that regard. So there's culturally speaking, at least, there was a difference in education. If that is true, what is that difference and why is that difference? Like, what is the wisdom behind that difference, if you can offer any insight to that?
Right. So, traditionally, the question is, why is education in Shastra different for men and different for women?
Yes.
If we see the term Shastra, the term itself is very vast. The Amar Kosh, which is the standard lexicon for Sanskrit language, it says that Shastra means Grantha. Any literary composition can be known as Shastra. So, Vedas is also Shastra, Upanishads is also Shastra, Puran is also Shastra, Geet Govind is also Shastra, Chaitanya Charitamrita is also Shastra. Tomorrow, if you write something and it is accepted by the devotees worldwide, then after a few generations, it will become known as Shastra. So, Shastra is a very broad term. And when Prabhupada spoke about it, Prabhupada spoke mainly about the Vedas, not about other Shastras. Because in Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 4th chapter, 25th verse, Vyasadeva says, Tri Shudra Dvija Bandhuram Traina Shruti Gochara. He says that mainly for the ladies, I am writing Srimad Bhagavatam. Very clearly it is said, first name is Tri. So the first adhikari for Srimad Bhagavatam mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam is Tri. And so when different individuals have been given different adhikars in different shastras, and ladies have been given adhikar, or they have been given rights in almost all types of shastra, including those which are promising liberation from the material world. Now I would like to give some examples, because it is said that sometimes it says ladies should not be given any Vedic rights, no Vedic rights at all. So I would like to say this thing, I would like to share something. See, our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, it is guided by the Sama Veda, because Satkriya Sardipika, And there is something called as Griya Sutra. Griya Sutra means sutras which dictate how householder should carry out Vedic duties. That is called as Griya Sutra. Because as a householder, one has to maintain a lot of Vedic duties, and one has to have Vedic fire in the home at regular times. So in the Gobil Griya Sutra, which governs the Samaveda or the Gaudiya Vaishnav Sampradaya, it is very clearly stated, and I am sharing my screen once again. See, it's very good to have pramanas so everybody can note it down, and then there is no doubt at all. So I am sharing pramana once again. So in Gobil Griya Sutra, it is said like this: Kamam griye agnau patni juhuyat Sayam pratar homo griha pratni griya esho agnir bhavati iti. This is Kamam, by her own desire. Grihiye agnau patni juhiyat. A wife should offer oblations in the domestic Vedic fires ignited in the morning and evening. Sayam pratar homo. And why should she do that? Then it says griha patni. The home is nothing but the wife. Because in actuality, the home is called a home because the wife is present, because the lady is present. And grihiya esho agnir bhavati. And the fire is also for the benefit of the home. So therefore, the wife also should offer oblations. Now, very traditional commentator Bhattanarayan, Bengali Brahman, he says in his commentary, Kamam ichhaya griye avasthe agno patni juhyat sayam pratar homo na anyad apiti. By her desire, a wife should offer oblations in the fire, na anyad apiti. Nobody else should do that. Kasmat, then here, why should one do that? And samakyanat, because it is well known. What is well known? Griha patni, the home is nothing but the wife. Griya esho agnir bhavati, and the fire is also for the benefit of the home. Tatha cha smaranam, and then he reminds us of a verse which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke. Na griham ityahur grihini griham uchyate tayahi sahita sarvan purusharthan samashmute. So he reminds that actually a home is not a home without a wife. It is the wife or the lady who gives true meaning to the home. So why should she not, be allowed to conduct fire sacrifices? So then he says, Agnir api esha grihyo bhavati, and the fire is also for the benefit of the home. Etasmat samakhyanat patni joya. Therefore, the wife should also offer oblations. Then he says, Sacha anyasya hotur abhave. But mainly she does that if the husband is not present for some reason. And then he says, Tatascha tavan matram tam adhyapay. So the husband should teach her at least those mantras which are required for offering fire sacrifice at home. So this is very clearly mentioned, at least in the Vedas, in our branch, it is very clearly mentioned. Now, how many husbands are teaching their wives? That's a different question. How many husbands are Nitya Agnihotris? Every day they are offering Agnihotra. That's a different question. Oh, husband themselves may not be knowing, then what will he teach his wife? So, Andha yathandher upaniyamana. Blind person cannot lead another person.
Yeah,
so,
because so many husbands are just not well informed, That's why we are trying to provide this this information, essentially. And just commenting, Prabhu, on this element of like the wife truly, or a woman truly being the spirit or the soul of a home. This has really been my experience just growing up, especially spending the second half of life in the home of my father without the presence of a lady, without the presence of my mother. It's just kind of like whatever place of residence a woman is not present, it just ends up being more of a cave, really, than a home. And even being in the ashram, it's like with a bunch of guys, it's just really so difficult to create. It's just the warmth doesn't manifest if the woman is not present. So a very, very powerful experience, certainly, I've had. The Shakti that they have.
Yes, true. And when I was in college, I have been to a boys' hostel. I would never want to go back to that place ever.
Yeah.
in some ways, Yamaraj's abode is better than a boys' hostel.
Especially in India.
Yes. Right. So when a lady is present in home, she gives life to the home, and this is how Vedas are describing ladies at home. So that is a very nice way of describing the ladies, and they have been given rights to offer fire oblations uh, in the fires that are there in the home. Now, I don't want to simply stop there.
Yes.
Then comes other shastra. So there is Kam Shastra. This is very rarely discussed among devotees. So Kam Shastra should be discussed. This is not a subject matter of discussion for sannyasis, but Grihastha should privately discuss this. Kam Shastra very specifically mentions one thing. Kama Shastra says that there are 64 arts that girls should know, and not boys. They are specifically mentioned for girls. So these 64 arts you will also find in the commentary to Brahma Samhita by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Question arises, originally before these 64 arts are explained in which literature? So originally they are explained in Kama Shastra. And Vatsyayan in his Kama Sutra, sometimes Kama Sutra is heavily misinterpreted literature. People think Kama Sutra means, on page 1, it will be describing the prayojan. Okay, so Kama Sutra is not about, that a lot of Kama Sutra is about specifying how husband and wife should stay at home. And so in the Kama Sutra, it is very specifically mentioned. Are you able to see the screen, please?
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
sure.
Okay. Yes. So it says 64 arts. Abhyasa prayojamscha chatuhu shashtikan yogan kanya rahasi ekakini abhyaseta. So I say abhyasa prayojamscha. 64 arts are to be practiced. Chatushashtikan. These are 64 yogan arts. Kanya rahasini ekakini abhyaseta. So in a secret place, along with other friends, a kanya, a girl who desires to marry, she should study these 64 arts. Definitely she should study. So see, in various other literature also, women have been given rights. Now comes the question mainly of get about rights in the Vedas, because if somebody has rights in the Vedas, then they have rights almost in all sorts of literature. So if it is called as Pradhan Malla Nyaya. Pradhan Malla Nyaya means if you tackle the main wrestler, then all other wrestlers can be easily tackled. So if we discuss about rights in studying the Vedas, then everything else will be easily covered. You see, in the Shastra, there are two types of ladies described. One is called as Brahma Vadini, one is called as Sadhyo Vadhu. So Brahma Vadini means she is very serious about spiritual life. Very simple-hearted girl, very serious about spiritual life, not materialistic at all, willing to render service to the cause of her own spiritual life. She is termed as Brahma Vadini. In short, somebody who is very genuinely, wholeheartedly dedicated to spiritual advancement and doesn't want to waste her time. So for such ladies, there is provision of studying all the Vedas, of not getting married, of staying at home with her father, and dedicating her entire life to study of Vedas. Now somebody may say, is there any example in Shastra? So there is an example in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I am sharing my screen once again. Those devotees who are interested should note down this particular verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is 4.164. Sorry, I forgot to mention the verse number. तेभ्यो दधार कन्ये द्वे वयुनाम धारिणीं स्वधा उभे ते ब्रह्मवादिन्यौ Jnana Vijnana Parage. See, Brahma Vadinyo, the dual case of the term Brahma Vadini is mentioned in the verse directly. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Swadha, who was offered to the Pitas, begot two daughters named Vayuna and Dharini, both of whom were impersonalists and were expert in transcendental and Vedic knowledge. Somebody may say this is Prabhupada's English translation. What do the ancient commentators say? So most of the commentators say Jnanam Shastriyam. The term Jnana here refers to knowledge of all the Shastras. So very clearly, Brahmavadini is eligible for studying all the Vedas. But somebody who is now, even amongst ladies, not all may be inclined to spiritual life. And frankly speaking, some of them may be very materialistic. So what use is it to give access to the Vedas to somebody who is not inclined to the Vedas? Let me give an example of this. Example is, for example, today everybody has free access to the Vedas. You can go and purchase, or you can download the 4 Vedas from the internet. With the original Sanskrit, all the commentaries, all the translations are easily available on the internet. For men, women, transgender, anybody, they can download it, no problem. My question is, how many men or women are today studying the original 4 Vedas, or writing or studying the commentaries, or writing realizations upon the 4 Vedas?
Yeah.
You see, we were very aggressive when we were pursuing for our rights. And when we got the rights, we have absolutely no interest in the subject matter.
Goodness.
And I am not only speaking about ladies here, also about men who were saying that, everybody should get right in the Vedas. So you got rights in the Vedas after getting, and so many, and especially not only in universities in India, especially in the universities in the West. In how many universities are the original 4 Vedas being taught? How many of the universities teach the 4 Vedas or doing any sorts of yagyas or anything like that? Because it was not about genuine pursuit of knowledge. It was about pursuit of equal rights. But pursuit of equal rights does not automatically ensure that one has the eligibility to study. That is from a slightly conservative point of view.
So the point here is that you opened up with saying shastra is broad term, and normally we use it to refer to Vedas in our literatures. And then according to Adhikar, you will be given education. Right. So this is the main thrust of this discussion so far. So then that brings up sort of the same question, but with this further clarification. Are men and women inherently qualified differently? This whole idea that you're receiving a certain education according to Adhikar. And so it seems to be a sort of implicit indication that the two genders are having different Adhikars inherently. And therefore the education is generally, although there may be exceptions like the daughters of, I forget here, in the 4th canto you were mentioning. Swada. There may be exceptions, Swada and Tarini are exceptions, but the general rule is that women are maybe generally qualified in one way and men are generally qualified in another way, and therefore their education is distinct because of that, which yes. I guess in the postmodern mindset, we find that to be maybe somewhat abhorrent, or we have some suspicion around that. I was just wanting to know if you can give just a further clarification about the wisdom of that approach. I mean, you've already mentioned about people fighting for their rights and not caring for the subject, so that's really a clarification. But just maybe some further insight to this, that, okay, the genders may in fact be having different adhikar, and therefore there's wisdom in giving this different education instead of trying to impose a sort of equal education on people who have different adhikar.
Right. So genders have different adhikars when they are non-Vaishnavas. Non-Vaishnavas means they are not following any system of yoga. General materialists, there is definitely a distinction of adhikar, because there has to be, because they have to stay on the path of dharma. In order to stay on the path of dharma, the Vedas have said those who are non-devotees or non-jnanis, they have to follow a certain adhikar. And this is not, this Krishna specifically said, Maya Srishtam. It was created by myself. Guna Karma Vibhagasha, according to the innate nature of individuals. And it is there so that the society outside, which is not devotee, it should be guided according to the rules of Varna and Ashram. Therefore, that adhikar has been separate for non-devotees. Now, when it comes to the case of devotees, then the adhikar comes to almost the same. Because in the case of devotees, Srila Jiva Goswami specifies one thing in his commentary to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. What does he say in his commentary to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu? Srila Jiva Goswami, when he speaks about jnana, means knowledge, he says bhakti jnana, knowledge that which is pertaining to bhakti. Jiva Goswami makes a very specific statement. What statement does he make? I am sharing my screen once again. He says, in regards to bhakti jnana, tasya avashya apekshaniyatvat. It is definitely expected from every sadhaka, male or female. Every sadhaka is expected to have knowledge of bhakti literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. All bhakti literature should be thoroughly studied by men and women. And Srila Prabhupada confirmed this, and you might be knowing that quote from Srila Prabhupada when he is writing a letter to his disciple Hamsadutta Prabhu. He says, all of my sons and daughters should have Bhakti Vedanta degree. You might have heard that, you might have seen that letter. If those of us who have not seen that letter, I will show that letter because I have quoted it here. So Srila Prabhupada makes a statement that, I want all my spiritual sons and daughters, they will inherit the title of Bhakti Vedanta. And these people, these devotees, this family of transcendental diploma will continue through the generation. So this is a letter to Hamsadutta. Now, to become a Bhakti Vedanta, you cannot become a Bhakti Vedanta unless you study Ishopanishad, unless you study Bhagavad Gita, unless you study Srimad Bhagavatam. And Ishopanishad is directly Veda. Ishopanishad is the last chapter of Shukla Yajurved, 40th chapter of Shukla Yajurved. So any lady who is studying Ishopanishad is directly studying Shukla Yajurved. And by Srila Prabhupada's own words, she has been given that right because he expects her to become Bhakti Vedanta.
This is really nice. Damodar Prasad here says, Hari Parshad Prabhu has taught me to be more open-minded to appreciate our Srila Prabhupada as a powerful link in the school rather than the entire school in and of himself, which is a very nice comment. There's just one angle that I want to bring in here is that Srila Prabhupada has set such an incredible example of including ladies in this universal transcendental enterprise of Krishna consciousness. But there are also certain places, certain purports where Srila Prabhupada makes certain statements that are very difficult, very, very difficult to understand and reconcile, and which seem to be somewhat contrary to the way that he actually behaved, or some of the actions that he took. For instance, initiating given women second initiation. So I'm just going to share a quick extract here. This is Srimad Bhagavatam 1:15:37, which says that one should not rot in the dark well of household life till one is dragged out by the will of Yamaraj. Now, in saying that, I'm also assuming that perhaps Srila Prabhupada is referring to what we like to call the Griyamedi ashram, or that which is outside of the category of being Vaishnavas. But then in the purport, it gets a little sticky, and this is just also something that I would like to share, where Srila Prabhupada says, because Striya, women class, are taken less intelligent, they should be given protection, but they cannot be elevated. But here, in the Bhagavad Gita, he surpasses all these formalities. Lord Krishna surpasses all these formalities. He's giving facility to everyone, never mind what he is. In the social structure, you may consider that woman is less intelligent or a Shudra or less purified. But in spiritual consciousness, there is no such bar. Here, Krishna accepts everyone. Either you become woman, or you are Shudra, or a Vaishya, or whatever you may be. That doesn't matter. But then it goes a little further where it is said that similarly women class, they are taken as Shudra. Just like the thread ceremony is given to Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, but there is no thread ceremony for the woman class. So these things are still stated, but we see that the way that Srila Prabhupada acted was different, yet it is still difficult for people to kind of reconcile such truths.
I like to amplify this with a question also. Same question, same as what he's bringing up, just to what we've been hearing from you so far, Hari Parshad, is that when it comes to Bhakti Gyan, so everyone's invited. That's clear. But it's the intersection between the social world that the shastras are presenting Bhakti and Bhakti, like that intersection of the two is where all the fighting happens. Like I don't think I know any devotee, thank God. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I know any devotee who would say that a woman, for example, should be barred from learning anything related to the transcendent. That's clear. No one has any arguments about that. But when it comes to the social, like how do you conduct yourself as a devotee? And we're taking a little assistance as best we can from what we hear in the shastra. It's that intersection between the two that all the fighting begins. And so it's kind of hard to know, okay, when it comes to bhakti, fine, but now you're living as a man, you're living as a woman. So these are the parameters that you should follow according to shastra. So that's the part that gets confusing.
So I have a general rule which I follow in my life. I have seen the behavior of various devotees. Some behavior is very shastric, and some behavior I have seen, frankly, is very ashastriya. And I have a very general rule which I follow, that I don't give any prescriptions to anyone unless they ask me something. You see, unless they have some shraddha in me, till that point of time, I don't instruct anybody personally. Because to try and instruct somebody personally if they don't have shraddha in us, so that is basically it is useless. And especially when you do it in Harinam, it turns into an offense also. So in other fields also, one should not instruct a person who does not have faith in us. And this trend of instructing anyone and everyone, irrespective of whether they have accepted us as guru or not, it's a very damaging trend. And personally, I myself have stopped advising people. Although, in many places, as soon I have observed in many places, I can give immense amount of advice, but that is not my domain. So just sit in a simple Srimad Bhagavatam class and just see. If I sit, my grammatical mind is always observing. What is this person's pronunciation? Then grammar is where everybody falls.
Right.
So there is no point in trying to instruct other people who don't have faith in us. And when somebody has faith in us, then we should instruct them, and they should also be prepared to handle the truth that is given in Shastra. So they should not approach us unless and until they are willing to hear what is given in Shastra. And once they have that faith, then then they should come to a person, they should ask, and then whatever is given in Shastra, I will try to tell them to the best of my capacity. This is the approach that I have been taking. It has worked very well for me in the past decade, very well for me, and very less conflicts. And so that is what I do, Prabhu. Because in Shastra there are many vidhis, many rules and regulations prescribed. But for Vaishnavas, it is mantratas, tantratas, chidram, desha, kalara, vastutah, sarvam karoti nischidram anusankirtanam tava. So for those of us who have not seen this verse, I would like to highlight this verse. It is from Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 23rd chapter, verse number 16. So I am sharing my Vedabase folio screen. Mantratas tantratas chidram desha kalarha vastutah sarvam karoti nischidram anusankirtanam tava. The translation by Prabhupada is, there may be discrepancies in pronouncing the mantras, observing the regulative principles. There may be discrepancies in regards to time, place, person, and paraphernalia. But when your Lordship's holy name is chanted, everything becomes faultless. So this is the attitude that I have been trying to keep, because if I try to see faults, there are unlimited number of faults that can be seen. So this is very important to understand that I should not be the seer of faults. When I see myself, how many faults I have committed while learning grammar, I am ashamed of myself. So what should I say of others?
Okay, I have one just minor thing on that. Just Prabhupada, I feel, puts us in a conundrum, because I feel like he's one of the only acharyas that we encountered so far that has like a pretty extensive social commentary. Like reading other works of acharyas, they don't touch the social world at all when trying to establish the siddhantas of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Whereas Prabhupada has much to say. So although we may not be in the spirit of instructing others, and I also personally try to avoid that, when you're having to represent, let's say a particular statement in shastra that may be a little contentious, and you have to represent Prabhupada also because you're in the Bhagavatam class and you're speaking from his purport. How do you deal with that sort of situation, which creates that little conundrum is there?
Right. So the usual thing which one should understand is, when Prabhupada gives statements which are restrictive towards certain individuals. One thing, for example, this was said, Karuna Avatar Prabhu was saying that women are less intelligent. Frequently it has been seen. Many times I was asked this question, and one time a devotee lady asked this question. So I said very clearly that there is no question of unintelligent person being a devotee. We said very clearly in Shastra, we know this verse, Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam Sango Pangastra Parshadam Yagyai Sankirtana Prayar Yajanti Hi Sumedhasaha. Sumedhasa means only the most intelligent people will worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So less intelligent and most intelligent cannot fit in the same box. So since she is most intelligent, so she is worshipping, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The most important principle is specified by Rupa Goswami, that anukulyasya sankalpaha pratikulyasya varjanam. You should interpret statements in such a way that it is favorable for the listener's bhajan. It should not be unfavorable for the listener's bhajan. All statements, if you use a Prabhupada statement to hammer someone and it becomes unfavorable for their bhajan and they leave bhakti and go away, then what is the use of quoting that statement? Better to have interpreted it in such a way that they feel encouraged in their bhajan. And it is a fact that any lady who takes to bhakti, it cannot be less intelligent, because the shastra itself says sumedhasa. Sumedhasa means she most intelligent men and women. So all the devotees especially are most now outside society, we can't say about them, both men and women. I cannot give any guarantee. They are sorry, but many of them are men and women both. They are pouting on Instagram. How can they be called So how can they be called intelligent for spiritual life? They are very clearly Shastra is saying what it is. So as far as spiritual life is concerned, devotees are intelligent. Those who are non-devotees are not considered very intelligent. It's a very clear statement.
So, Prabhu, just emphasizing this categorical difference between devotees and non-devotees. Still, there are certain statements in the Bhagavatam and also Srila Prabhupada's commentary on it that kind of like amplifies it, which can imply that even though women are devotees, they are still women. Like, for instance, there is one place in Bhagavatam 3:23-44 in the lila between Kardama Muni and Devahuti, it is said, Bhagavatam 3:23-44, having excited that great woman's desires and enthusiasm to the utmost, he assumed 9 separate forms and made love with his beloved for many years, which seemed like a moment to her. And then in the purport, it is stated that Kardama Muni expanded himself into 9 forms. Instead of 1, he became 9, and 9 persons had sexual intercourse with Devahuti for many, many years. It is understood that the sexual appetite of a woman is 9 times greater than that of a man. That is clearly indicated here. Otherwise, Kardama Muni would have no reason to expand himself into 9. So this is somewhat problematic because Devahuti was a devotee of the Lord, but still this kind of like material imposition of her being in a female body is placed onto her and is seemingly amplified by Srila Prabhupada. And just to round it off, Prabhu, you're saying that, you know, the consideration should be there that if a particular statement may not be beneficial to someone's bhajan, it should just be kind of not made. But it's kind of like, I feel like a lot of devotees have this problem that, you know, okay, certain things you're not going to say to certain people if it's not favorable to them. But for many people, it's still a problem that this statement was made in the first place, that it is there in the Bhagavatam, that it was said, that Srila Prabhupada, who came to bring us Krishna consciousness and the Vedas, said such things. So how to reconcile, just bringing it back to this point of like the categorical difference.
Right. So this is a very important statement to understand because it's specified in a purport that Devahuti, in relation to Devahuti, it was specified that 8 times more lust is present. It's a very difficult statement to understand. But let me put it from a sort of more Sanskrit point of view. Prabhupada translates it as lust, but where does this idea originate? The idea originates in one of the names that is given to all the women. One of the names that is given to all the women, the Amar Kosh very clearly says that one of the names of a woman, one of the synonyms of a woman is Kamini. It is Amar Kosh 263. And it says, Bhuyan Kamo Asyaha. She has more material desires in her. And when Kamaha, ultimately in English, Kamaha gets translated in many ways. One of the ways in which Kamaha gets translated is lust. So Shastra says that in general, material desires are greater, not that lust is greater. In general, material desires are greater. And this is something in the external world also we can see in some places happening, because most of the fashion industry, most of the movie industry is centered around that. So Shastra makes a very non-judgmental remark about it. So it's therefore when Kamaha gets translated as lust, so then it gets translated, women have more lust than men. But the general principle that the material desires in general are more in especially non-devotee women. Sometimes they may also come in women who are devotees, but it's like the biting of a snake who has no fangs, because it doesn't affect them ultimately. So sometimes it comes up in men also. Saubari was not happy with 50. So
right.
So see how many places men are criticized. See in Srimad Bhagavatam, she said he is like a pig, hog and dog who eats stool. Imagine the same statement for ladies. There would have been. Today's society is such that we need to have a little more thick skin in order to
sorry
understand what the statements of Shastra are.
Yes.
So this is what I would like to say. Shastra equally chastises men and women. But when it chastises women, we should not immediately run and try to find workarounds every time. So we should understand that Shastra is ultimately meant for instructing both. And if only men accept their part of the instructions and women don't accept their part, then benefit will not be acquired by the ladies. So this is the mindset of a sadhaka.
So good. Yeah.
Beautiful. I wanted to, I don't know if you want to say something more on this particular thing, but I wanted to shift gears into the archetypes of women that we are most commonly encountering. It appears that way in Shastra. But it seems like you want to say something before we switch that gear, Karuna Avatara.
Yes, Hari Prashad Prabhu, I just want to also just appreciate this point. Well, what is coming up here is that the language in which ideas are conveyed is so essential, and Sanskrit being such a nuanced language, and things can be interpreted in so many different ways. And you know, there is this common concern about Srila Prabhupada, certain language that Srila Prabhupada used, which is difficult for Westerners to digest. So I'm just very grateful that you're able to give us also this perspective on just the language that through which we understand things as the vessel, and coming to know that like things may be interpreted in different ways. And I feel like that's just something very essential to be kept in mind. So thank you for giving us that perspective.
I'd like to also just say quickly that, hey guys, we do see your questions and we will get to them at the end, but just so that there's a flow and continuity of thought, we're going to take the questions at the end so that everything stays, you know, structured nicely. All right, switching gears. Let's look at these archetypes. So I want to start with the Temptress one, because that's the, you know, especially having, you know, grown up in the Brahmacharya ashram, that was the one we got the most excitement about. You know, let's talk about the Temptress, you know, how bad she is. And it comes up quite a bit. I mean, from even from a metaphysical level, the Maya Shakti, you know, the enchantress is a woman. So metaphysically, she's bewildering all the jivas. And that seems like that's bad. And then that Maya Shakti becomes personified as an actual material woman. And so Maya's bad because she's bewildering us, and her personification as one. That means she's also bad and attack with our voices and bash them and so on. And I kind of wanted to get into that. I specifically wanted to look at one passage which we sent to you earlier. So I'm just going to read the passage. This is 3rd Canto, chapter 31, verses 34 through 39. Just the context is the soul has just gotten out of hell. He's gone through all the different species of life. He's finally gotten a human body. The soul who becomes a devotee inside the womb is glorified, but then the other jiva who comes out is just like a normal guy. He again comes out, he falls into bad association, and then this passage comes about woman, which is like probably one of the more heavier ones in the Bhagavatam. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Demonstrating this archetype of woman as enchantress or temptress. So again, 3:31 verses 34 through 39. I'm just going to read the passage here. One should not associate with a coarse fool who is bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who is no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman.
Criticism of men.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions. Where is this shastra criticizes?
Yeah, Shamala Kishori, now you are satisfied.
Shastra criticized Hari Parshad Das directly. He called him a coarse fool.
Okay, the passage continues. The infatuation and bondage which accrue to a man from attachment to any other object is not as complete as that resulting from attachment to a woman or to the fellowship of men who are fond of women. At the sight of
attachment to women is criticized, not women are criticized. Please note very carefully. The statement doesn't criticize women, it criticizes attachment to women. Please read the statement again so that devotees will be able to hear again.
Yes, the infatuation and bondage which accrue to a man from attachment to any other object is not as complete as that resulting from attachment to a woman or to the fellowship of men who are fond of women. At the sight of his own daughter, Brahma was bewildered by her charms and shamelessly ran up to her in the form of a stag when she took the form of a, how do you say this, hen? Anyway, a woman deer. Amongst all kinds of living entities begotten by Brahma, namely men, demigods, and animals, none but the sage Narayana is immune to the attraction of Maya in the form of a woman. Just try to understand the mighty strength of my Maya in the shape of a woman, who, by the mere movement of her eyebrows, can keep even the greatest conquerors of the world under her grip. One who aspires to reach the culmination of yoga and has realized himself by rendering service unto me should never associate with an attractive woman. For such a woman is declared in the scripture to be the gateway to hell for the advancing devotee. Actually, a couple more verses here. The woman created by the Lord is the representation of Maya, and one who associates with such Maya by accepting services must certainly know that this is the way of death, just as a blind well covered with grass. A living entity who, as a result of attachment to a woman in his previous life, has been endowed with the form of a woman, foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man, her husband, as the bestower of wealth, progeny, house, and other material assets. And last verse I'll read here. A woman, therefore, should consider her husband, her house, and her children to be the arrangement of the external energy of the Lord for her death, just as the sweet singing of the hunter is death to the deer. So pretty heavy passage. It actually criticizes equally. It kind of gets both people, both man and woman in there. So it's a nice passage in that sense. Can you unpack this for us as a little bit, as a brahmachari reading this, it's like, okay, Maya is bad because she's made me forget Krishna and made me forget my own soul. And the woman is the personification of Maya. So she's also bad and not fit to be, she's the gateway to hell. And she's a source of death. And this thing is very prominent sometimes in the minds of young and immature devotees, what can be expected. But it is apparently encountered in shastra. So how are we supposed to understand this? What is the wisdom? And what is the implication of these sorts of ideas?
Just a brief amplification. It is also stated in Bhagavatam 5.14.3 purport. Srila Prabhupada says, one Hindi poet has sung, and then Hindi, during the daytime, the wife is compared to a witch, and at night she's compared to a tigress. Her only business is sucking the blood of her husband both day and night. During the day, there are household expenditures, and the money earned by the husband at the cost of his blood is taken away. At night, due to sex pleasure, the husband discharges blood in the form of semen. Oh my God.
I'm laughing because Karuna Avatara is not pulling his punches with these quotes. I did not know he was going to pull all these quotes up, Hari Parshad, just FYI.
But it's just the fact is, this is what we're dealing with. This is what is said. And therefore, we have to address it. Okay, so Hari Parshad Prabhu, please enlighten us.
So, first and foremost, I'll speak about the statements which are directly in the Vedas, because that statement which you quoted from a poet, Din ka dakini, Raat ka bagini, Palak palak lahu chuse. That is the statement in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.14.3. That's the statement by a poet. So I will not take it on the same level of authority as the direct words of Srimad Bhagavatam.
The only reason, I just want to say, Prabhu, the only reason why I actually brought it up is because Srila Prabhupada included it in his purport. And Srila Prabhupada is the representative. So that's why I thought it was still worthy of being mentioned, since the pure devotee quoted it.
Right. Okay. No issues. We'll deal with that also. But first, I will like to begin with what the Srimad Bhagavatam says. And it's very important to study these sections very nicely. The thing is, in the commentaries to this section, it is very clearly mentioned by the previous acharyas, and I am sharing the commentaries. Devotees can see the direct words of Sridhar Swami. So Sridhar Swami in his commentary on the 39th verse, he said, Asya mumukshor yah pramada nirayadvaram vadanti. So a lady is considered to be, attachment to lady is considered to be the gateway to hell for advancement for a mumukshu. Mumukshu means somebody who wants liberation from material world. Yoginaha. Then it is not considered as gateway to hell for somebody who doesn't desire liberation. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, no shayanaha patati adaha. A person who is already sleeping on the ground cannot fall. Iti nyayena, by this logic, karmi stri sangakrid api na dushyati iti love. So a karmi who associates with a lady doesn't get any fault. Because just as a person who's sleeping on the ground doesn't fall further, a karmi doesn't fall because of association of the opposite gender. It's true for both genders, male and female. So Jiva Goswami softens it further. He says, Pramadasu Sviyasu api, even with one's own wife, association can be painful for a person who is aspiring for liberation. Jiva Goswami says, Niraya, hell means what does it mean? The abode of Yamra? He says, no, samsara. Niraya means returning back to the material world.
Right.
So very clearly Jiva Goswami interprets hell not as literal hell, but he interprets hell as returning back to the material world. So we have to understand these statements from the point of view of the previous acharya. Does it mean that every person who associates with the opposite gender ends up in hell? Obviously not. So Jiva Goswami is making sense out of all the statements that are there in Shastra. This is one of the very good things about Jiva Goswami is very rational line of thought. Not emotional, but very rational line of thought. And when he wants to get emotional, then he writes a separate book, Gopal Champu. So that's Jiva Goswami. Right. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is different. So you don't know in the commentary when emotions will start and when tattva will start. So, but Jiva Goswami is very much vichar pradhan. He's, when he's speaking in Srimad Bhagavatam, he's very carefully noting it. Now, you also spoke about the verse which says that a woman also falls in Maya because a man comes in the form of Maya. So I wanted to mention that this is the verse that a living entity who as a result of attachment to a woman in his previous life has been endowed with the form of a woman foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man, her husband, as the bestower of wealth, progeny, house and other material assets. Sridhar Swami very clearly says in the commentary, Mumukshum striyam prati etad eva aha. Ladies are also desirous of liberation. If there is any lady desirous of liberation, she should note this very carefully. Because attachment to any object in the material world, any person in the material world can become the cause of niraya. Niraya means hell, but hell should not be interpreted as hell. Hell should be interpreted as samsara, returning back to the material world. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Yatha bhakti jnanavatam pumsam yoshid anartha hetus. So even for those who are bhakti jnanis, those who are devotionally inclined and knowledgeable people, association of ladies may be, for a man, association of ladies may be the cause of anartha. And he says, Tathaiva bhakti jnanavati nam yoshitam pumamsta. Similarly, for devotee scholar ladies, association of the opposite gender, opposite association of the man may similarly be harmful. Sri Madhvacharya further says, Sat pumsu tatcha tatha strishu na sango dosham avadet. Madhvacharya clarifies by saying, for devotee men and devotee women, please don't say that this fault arises. Association with devotee man, association of devotee women does not give rise to the same fault. And in his commentary to 558, Prabhupada quotes this verse from Madhvacharya also. Brahmadya yagya valkyadya muchayante stri sahayana. Individuals such as Brahma and Yagyavalkya get liberated because they get help from their wives. So, and there is also a statement by Devahuti where she says that usually association between men and women is the cause of bondage. But when the same association is performed between sadhus, it leads to liberation. So, if you want, I can try to find that verse. Samgo yah samsriti hetur. I will find that verse. But this is the general line of thought. That is there.
Yes. I mean, we have full trust in you, but we know that you want to share the pramana just to.
Yes. Here is the pramana. I found it. See,
Yes.
It's very nice to share the pramana directly, so everybody gets convinced on the spot. See here. Sango yah samsriter hetur asatsu vihito dhiya sa eva sadhushu krito nisangatvaya kalpate. 3:23:55 Devahuti. After Kapil Muni criticized all the ladies, he criticized man as the lapdog of a woman. So then what Devahuti learns is this: association for sense gratification is certainly the path of bondage. But the same type of association performed with a saintly person leads to the path of liberation, even if performed without knowledge. So the devotee, bhakti yogi knows which aspect of shastra we should accept, what is meant for us, what is meant for the jnani, what is meant for the devotee. So different instructions, different shloks for different folks.
Nice.
I have a follow-up for this though. Just first of all, very wonderful explanation, clear. It does seem though that even for devotees, so we're not exactly mukshibhi, we're not desiring liberation per se, we desire bhakti, and it may not be considered an egregious fault for having association of the opposite gender. However, and this is not intended as a judgmental statement, there is a lot of divorce in our communities, which makes me think that, we haven't really learned the art of how to associate with the opposite gender in the most healthy way. And we would do well, first of all, for our social relationship, we would do well to get guidance, obviously. And shastra, of course, the shastra we follow doesn't always seem to offer the greatest amount of guidance in that regard. But even when it comes to our life of bhakti, it seems like even if you're coming together with a sadhu, like a woman who's a sadhu, a man who's a sadhu, there still seems to be need for prudence or judiciousness in how you associate, so that this manifestation of that association as Maya doesn't actually affect you. Is some comment on that or further clarification?
Yeah. It's we as a community, I think immense amount of training is needed and immense amount of mature guidance in Shastra is needed. And if that guidance and that training would have been there, 99% of the cases could have been avoided. So because of lack of training in how to understand Shastra, how to apply Shastra, because dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. What is dharma, how to apply it at a specific point of time is hidden in a dark cave, nihitam guhayam. So somebody should explain grihastha dharma to grihasthas, and it should not be a sannyasi.
Right.
Yeah. And also just like divorce, if we're going to start talking about this, there's so much.
We're not.
No. I know we're not. I'm just saying, like, even beyond just associating intelligently between the genders, like, talking about divorce in our society, there's just so much that plays into it. So, that it requires a lot of separate discussion.
Yes.
Because see, if grihasthas start writing a book for sannyasi, and sannyasi start writing a book for grihasthas, and then you will have the obvious thing that you see in the society. You will have this. So this thing should not. A grihastha should write a book for grihasthas. A grihastha who has gone through the experience, who understands maturely how to apply Shastra, that grihastha should write a book for grihasthas. It is not the adhikar for sannyasis. Very clearly, I am saying it is not an adhikar for sannyasis. Adi Shankaracharya, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ishwar Puri, Madhavendra Puri, nobody wrote a grihastha manual.
Right.
So similarly, a Grihastha should write a book for Grihasthas, and then there should be an explanation of all variations of Grihastha ashram, right from the strictest variation all the way up to the more liberal variations of Grihastha ashram, because the main thing is to protect the ashram. If the ashram is destroyed, then the entire purpose of getting into spiritual life and getting into an ashram, everybody falls apart, and it damages one's spiritual life immensely. So I think that's a separate discussion, but I would just like to make a statement that our society needs a Grihastha manual very badly, and written by a Grihastha.
Yeah, just to bring up this example.
Yeah.
When a sannyasi writes a book for a woman. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, because if Grihastha starts saying that a sannyasi should act like this, a sannyasi should eat only 3 morsels of food every day, a sannyasi should wake up at 4 o'clock every morning, and the sannyasi will say, hey, who are you to instruct us? So vice versa.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't help. I'm just like laughing hysterically because just the dysfunction is so high. Okay, I don't know.
Oh, we're happy you can laugh at it, Jai, when like thousands of people are so.
I mean, lives are being ruined. I'm not laughing at that. I'm just laughing at how clearly, like, this should be obvious. What Hari Prashad is saying to us should be obvious, and yet it's taking us 50 years and we still haven't fully figured it out. So it's kind of funny in a tragic way.
Yeah.
Thank you for this explanation. I'm going to switch gears to this other archetype that we seem to encounter quite a bit. And I want to give a disclaimer to myself. I'm not saying that these are the only archetypes encountered with women in Shastra. They're just ones that are most common, and I think in a lot of ways stick out the most to a lot of guys joining new, especially like when I joined. These are the ones that stick out very prominently. And that's why I wanted to speak about them.
These are the archetypes which were selected from Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes.
In other literature, there are hundreds and thousands of archetypes of women. In Ujjwal Nilmani, Srila Rupa Goswami says at the end of 5th chapter, there are 360 different archetypes of Nayikas, most of whom are personified in Srimati Radharani.
Wow.
There is Abhisarika. Abhisarika means she who either goes to a designated place to meet her lover, or she who invites her lover to meet at a designated place. And there is Vasak Sajja. Vasak Sajja means she who dresses very nicely. And there is Utkantita, she who waits eagerly. Vipralabdha, she who waits but the lover doesn't come. Khandita, who becomes angry. Kalahantarita, the hero is fallen at her feet and begging for forgiveness, and she's around her friends and she is criticizing her hero. And so all these are the many archetypes mentioned in Ujjwal Nilmani, but we have taken prominently those that are there in the Bhagavatam.
Thank you for that clarification. Sidebar, somehow or other, I'm going to pray to Krishna like very sincerely, which I don't do very often, but I'm going to try to pray very sincerely that we can get you on again to talk about poetry, which is one of your strong suits, and which I think the devotee community could benefit immensely just hearing about poetry and the impact of that for our inner life. But back to the discussion at hand, we're looking at this other one we encounter quite a bit is woman as, I use the word fortress, and I think I got that from the 3rd canto with Kashyapa Muni, referring to his wife as a fortress, giving him protection. And it kind of spoke to me of the Sri Dharma. He's saying that the woman is like a fortress because it protects the senses of the husband. I think this is coming in 3rd canto, chapter 14. This is a little bit, I should have go and look it up. But anyway, it spoke to me of the Sri Dharma. And when you look at Narada's statements about Sri Dharma, he's giving in summary, it makes it appear for an immature reader that woman doesn't have any meaning for herself. Her value is only in relationship to the service she can render to her husband. And so I just wanted to look at that passage in short. This is Narada Muni, 7th canto, chapter 11. He's summarizing the Sri Dharma. Here it is. To render service to the husband, to be always favorably disposed toward the husband, to be equally well disposed toward the husband's relatives and friends, and to follow the vows of the husband. These are the 4 principles to be followed by women described as chaste. A chaste woman must dress nicely and decorate herself with golden ornaments for the pleasure of her husband. Always wearing clean and attractive garments, she should sweep and clean the household with water and other liquids so that the entire house is always pure and clean. She should collect the household paraphernalia and keep the house always aromatic with incense and flowers, and must be ready to execute the desires of her husband, being modest and truthful, controlling her senses, and speaking in sweet words. A chaste woman should engage in the service of her husband with love according to time and circumstances. And this is the last thing here. A chaste woman should not be greedy, but satisfied in all circumstances. She must be very expert in handling household affairs and should be fully conversant with religious principles. She should speak pleasingly and truthfully and should be very careful and always clean and pure. Thus, a chaste woman should engage with affection in the service of a husband who is not fallen, which is a point that I always hear underscored when reading this passage. The one who engages in the service of her husband, following strictly in the footsteps of the goddess of fortune, surely returns home back to Godhead with her devotee husband and lives happily in the Vaikuntha planets. All right, so this sounds like classic patriarchal, sexes, and fill in the rest of the expletives that will come up in the postmodern world. This is exactly the sort of thing they say is leading to abuse of women, et cetera, et cetera. So let's hear the wisdom and implication of this, what's going on here.
Right. So these statements which are specifying Stri Dharma, and often you will find the Purushas or the men who are speaking about Stri Dharma, that when they are highlighting these statements, they are highlighting it as instructions to ladies that you should do this. You are expected to do this. Sometimes even within marriage, you are expected to do this. So one time I heard my Guru Maharaj speak about relationships in a marriage, and he said one thing, that out of all the statements in Shastra, one should select those statements which are applicable to oneself and carry out those statements without expecting the partner to carry out the statements which are applicable to them. So that is an ideal Vaishnava. Now, I took that statement very seriously, because if I take these statements and then in my own married life, if I'm saying you should be like this, you should be like that, definitely there will be, the happiness will not be there and the sweetness will not be there. Because Narad Muni is not forcing these instructions, upon all the ladies. First thing we have to understand is that Maharaj Yudhishthir asked all these questions about all varnas and ashramas. Right. So Narad Muni described all varnas and ashramas, and Grihastha ashram was included in that. So he described Grihastha ashram too. So it was not that he focused only on Grihastha ashram, but all the varnas and ashramas were described by Narad Muni. There Stri Dharma was also described, but at the same time one has to understand something. Stri Dharma, following these rules, they are applicable to a lady who enters into a Vedic marriage. First and foremost, a lady who enters into a Vedic marriage, then these instructions become applicable to her. Now question arises, what has the husband done that he deserves so much service?
Exactly. Like, what makes the husband worthy of that level of service and reverence?
Right. Is he embedded with, rubies and diamonds? What has the husband done for me that I should serve him? So these things should be explained, because there is a context behind the Vedic marriage. So at the time of the marriage, there is one specific, very clear understanding that when the husband and wife, they are getting married, at that particular point of time, it is the husband who accepts a major chunk of all the sinful reactions of the lady. So this is specified in Hari Bhakti Vilas. I am quoting the direct verse. Ragi chamatyaja dosha patni papam svabhartari तथा शिष्यार्जितम पापम गुरु प्राप्नोति निश्चितम. Just as the king takes the sinful reactions of his ministers upon himself, the husband takes upon the sinful reactions of his wife. Similarly, the guru also takes upon himself the sins of the disciple. Hari Bhakti Vilas says, Nishchitam, of this there is no doubt. So first and foremost, during the marriage ceremony, for a lady from a Vedic point of view means that a major chunk of her karma is transferred to the husband and she doesn't have to take care of it. So the first responsibility that the husband takes. Second is, primarily it is the husband who is responsible for taking good care of her. If the household is not properly managed financially, it is the husband to be blamed, not the wife. The husband takes the first blame for the house being not managed financially properly. It's not that, when they pay the bills, the husband cannot say, oh, you pay half the bill and I'll pay half the bill, because as spirit souls we are equal. When equality of spirit souls is not applicable while paying bills. So for that, the husband is clearly responsible. Very clearly he is responsible. So this is what a Vedic marriage is. And in a Vedic marriage, therefore, if any particular lady enters into a Vedic marriage, she should know very clearly what she is getting into. That what are the benefits and what are the responsibilities that are attached to a Vedic marriage. When she enters into a Vedic marriage, in front of the fire, in front of the Brahmanas, in front of all the Vaishnavas, there is a statement which she makes. This statement is given in Satkriya Sardipika. He says, Aham amuka dasadhikarinah anugata. That I am the follower of XYZ, whatever is the name of that husband, Das Adhikari. So this statement is uttered by the wife in front of fire, Brahmanas, Vaishnavas, so everybody should be first educated as to what a Vedic marriage is before they get into a Vedic marriage. Let's say they say, I don't like this concept of Vedic marriage. I would like to marry in another tradition. So I would like to have a Christian marriage. But then Christian marriage is also not very different. Christian marriage is guided more or less by the same rules of the Bible, because Bible, there is a book of, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Ephesians. Is that the correct pronunciation?
I wouldn't know. I'm not into the Bible.
Okay, I'm sorry. So there is a nice quote in the Bible, because if you have a Christian wedding, then you are governed by the rules of the Bible. And the Bible very clearly says in Ephesians 5:22, wives, be willing to serve your husbands the same as the Lord. Very clearly. So if somebody says I don't like Christian marriage, I want Islamic marriage, then Quran also says men are caretakers of women as men have been provisioned by Allah over women and tasked with supporting them financially. So in any culture that you get married, so it's not exclusively Vedic culture, so there are some rights and there are some responsibilities. Problem is, in today's generation, people want to claim all the rights and want to dispose of all the responsibilities. Yes, this is the problem. So then don't enter into a Vedic marriage. This is very clearly, it is, don't enter into a Vedic marriage. One should enter into when one knows what clearly are their rights and what clearly are their responsibilities. I'm being very honest about this. Otherwise, you can have a secular marriage now, and that is described in the Bhagavatam. By word of agreement, marriages may take place. But then again, when you have a secular marriage, you have to agree to some standards of moralities set by some person in the country, and those standards of morality are very fluid. The secular standards of morality, sorry to say, but they are very fluid. And I am showing an article because it's important to see what happens when secular marriages take place. So there was an article recently, and now this trend is catching up, and sooner or later people will ask questions about what Shastra says about this. So this is, you can see, now besides couples, you have something called as
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring this up. Yeah.
so thruples, and then you also have quads. So
Oh my God.
and they are out to prove that open relationships are more normal than you can think.
Right.
So where is the moral compass of the atheists and secular people?
Yeah, we just a quick shift. We have some really compelling comments here. Shamala Kishori is asking, some say that women have no varna, yet there seem to be as many varieties of disposition among women as among men. Can you please comment?
Oh yes, it's given directly in Shastra. I am quoting from Smriti, Harit Smriti. Na Shudra Samastriya. Don't think that women are like Shudras. And then Harit gives an argument by saying if women have no varna or if women are like Shudras, then how can such women give birth to Brahmana men? In order to give birth to a Brahmana man, the woman should also be a Brahmani. So without the woman being a Brahmani, she cannot, by birth, I am saying by law of birth,
Right.
unless the woman is a Brahmani, she cannot give birth to a Brahmana. So therefore, and if women don't have varna, then how can there be anulom and pratilom marriages? Because anulom and pratilom marriages, if you have heard this concept, that anulom and pratilom can only take place when women have a specific varna. So that will easily clarify this query.
I'm looking at some of the comments that are coming up, and it's something I've also thought about a lot, that it seems that respect among the genders has eroded tremendously because there aren't, this may itself be a controversial rubric to use, but there aren't clear gender roles anymore. As society's become more secularized and people are not even sure if they're a man or a woman, frankly speaking, that's becoming a thing. There's non-binarity and gender fluid and all sorts of things are coming up. So there isn't clarity about gender roles. And I just have the experience of like being in an organization where there aren't clear roles and how much powerful dysfunction that created. So I can only imagine when you're in a relationship, when the roles aren't clear, it creates a lot of dysfunction. And then you're part of this dysfunctional relationship for 1 year, 2 years or whatever. And you see that dysfunction like everywhere pervasive in the shows that you watch and the music that you're hearing about, et cetera, et cetera. The respect for each other is really gone down a lot. Like, one question is, well, what has the man done to deserve this type of woman? And then, the counter argument, well, what has the woman done to deserve this sort of man who would, et cetera, et cetera. It just doesn't look like there's that much deep regard. And I'm suggesting that a lot of it may be due to just lack of clarity of roles. And when you come to the shastra, it's like these super clear gender roles, which kind of shock us a little bit. Like, this doesn't seem equal, it doesn't seem fair. But there seems to be a profound wisdom in like, listen, the goal is actually this, getting out of the material world. That's the goal, first of all. And now you got this body, you have this body, they have these different archetypes. You do this, you do that, you come together, take care of things nicely so you can get to that goal. But that clarity isn't there anymore. And it's making it really hard it appears to me, I'm not in a relationship, but it appears to me from observation, it's making it really hard for people to navigate this man-woman thing in a healthy way.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question to, this entire, anybody who supports the concept of a secular society with fluid roles of gender. Why keep it limited only to gender? Let's say if I study sciences, if I study engineering, can I work as a chartered accountant in your secular society?
No.
Why?
Because you don't have adhikar.
Then you have another caste system in your society. The society is clearly divided into classes even today.
Right.
And just on the economic front, the society is clearly divided into classes. And so when division of society is needed economically, So why should not it not be needed socially? So the Shastra provides the social division, and modern society has economic division. Modern society cannot do away with economic divisions of class, divisions of labor. So this is something which has to be understood, and Varnashram has to be implemented in Prabhupada. One of the things which Prabhupada said, Daivi Varnashram, he wanted to implement. But we have to understand that people's lives are at stake here. When we are implementing Devi Varnashram, people's devotees' lives are at stake here.
Right.
So it should be implemented in such a way that the highest devotional benefit comes to the maximum number of devotees. And the maximum encouragement is given to them. So this is how Devi Varnashram or any Varnashram which facilitates bhakti has to be implemented. Not otherwise, it can turn out to be a disservice. So I think there are some more archetypes to be covered, or some
yes, I have a couple more here just for this one. Mother. I literally, when I came up with the title for the show, I thought that would be the least contentious of the archetypes mentioned. And until I shared, an acquaintance of all of ours, there was a video that went kind of viral in the devotee community of him referring to a young lady as mother, and she kind of snaps back and says, "I'm not a mother." And then he quotes a particular verse saying that all women should be considered mother except for one's wife. And someone made a meme about that. It became very popular in the devotee community. And I had a friend who wrote a little explanation for why he looks at women as mother, and that's proper. That's what he learned in ISKCON. I shared it on my page. I honestly, and I know no one's going to believe me when I say this, just because of the nature of my online persona, but I honestly didn't think people would respond to it that much. I just thought it would be dismissed. It was the most engaged with thing that I posted on my Facebook page so far. I had over 200 comments, and it was surrounding about, should woman be called mother or not, or be viewed as mother or not? And I didn't realize it would be such a contentious issue. I thought that would be the least of the issues around woman archetypes. So I wanted to, what's that all about? Like this mother archetype, we know there are 7 mothers. All women except for one's wife should be looked at as mother. And now there's this sort of sensitivity around, should we call women mother, or should they, can you help us navigate this particular archetype?
Right. So there are 3 questions here. First is about the archetype mother, because you said that there was a devotee who wants to address every woman as mother,
right?
And the woman becomes uncomfortable on hearing that. And it's very obvious, because she will become uncomfortable, because if she is young in age and she is addressed as a mother, then she will definitely become uncomfortable. If I am 10 years old and somebody says to me, oh, father, so then definitely it's not. So it's natural that this will be discomforting for her. So shastra should be quoted here. So what does shastra say? So this is within the domain of niti shastra, day-to-day codes of dealing. So according to niti shastra, there is a very clear statement made in niti shastra. I am sharing this statement. It says, yatha sambandham ahuyat. Yatha sambandham ahuyat abhashashwasya vaistriyam. Swiyam tu parikiyam va subhage bhaginiti. So it says, yatha sambandham ahuyat. Before or after conversations, or during conversations also, one should address ladies related to oneself using appropriate address for each relationship. Mother, or wife, etc. For ladies who are not related to oneself, one should address them as Subhage, or Devi, or Bhagini, or sister, etc. So this is very clearly given in Shukraniti, 3rd chapter, 18th verse, and we can all follow. So many times when I am addressing ladies, I call them Devi. Devi means, so many places in Shastra, ladies are addressed as Devi. So when it is a proper feminine mode of address, we just call them Devi. Devi is a very good way of addressing the ladies. And Devi means Divyati iti Devi. She is effulgent, therefore she is called as Devi. So we are complimenting her, very, very effulgent lady. I call you Devi, and that is how we should see. Now, if we have some other, we see a lady as sister. she may be a god sister, then we can call her as a sister. But if she is elderly in age, we can call her as a mother. So this is something which we should understand. So in this, both parties should be sensitive. So the lady cannot dictate to the man, you should call me only using this name. That is also improper. How can you dictate somebody else? And the man should also understand, what is the proper etiquette of addressing ladies. So that is
Kunada is, just to bring this up, but this obviously indicates a deeper issue and much deeper kind of work that needs to be done. We became uncomfortable because men would say mother and Mataji with a tone indicating how much we were despised. So
I mean, just to be fair, I can't speak to her experience of how men are treating, but that seems like a more personal or communal sort of thing versus men referring to women because we were trained that way. Like when I joined ISKCON, we were trained that all women are to be referred to as Mataji. So in many cases, when you have more old school training, and I joined in 2003, but I was trained by a very old school devotee. And that was a training that we got. So it was just like, and the culture that surrounded us was that culture, which wasn't even a problem until after 2010. It didn't even become an issue. All women referred to as Mataji. I never heard anyone complaining about it when I was growing up in ISKCON. So I don't know. I'm sure there are men out there who would say in a tone of derision and use it as a pejorative, but I don't think it's fair to suggest that's the rule because I haven't seen all men and how they use it. I would like to say our culture in ISKCON has been like that for a long time, and only recently has it become more of an issue. So I would, so anyway, we have our answer.
So I would say that, depending on who is addressing us, we should come to conclusion. It's not that a general term should not remind us of past difficult memories. If a person is addressing us using a particular name, then we should see what is the mood and intention of that person. If the mood and intention of that person is to make fun of us, then that is that we should stay away from such a person. But if by calling us mother or Mataji, they are genuinely being respectful of us, then we should give that consideration to them, because the person who is addressing us has no malicious intent while he is addressing us. That is what. So some consideration should be given.
I just want to make a sorry dear us assessor. So Jaya Jagannath, if you call me Mataji, I would say yes, my son. I'd be totally cool with that. I'd be very touched actually if you said that on a personal level.
No problem.
I feel very inspired by that person. Just one final thing. Yes, please.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Yes,
please.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
So just a little bit more, not too much because we don't want to keep you forever. I mean, we definitely want to, but that's not proper. But just a little bit more on this mother archetype. It seems like in the culture that we encounter today, there's some almost like it seems like a subtle animosity towards the mother archetype. Like it's not been its social role or even its spiritual role isn't esteemed, it seems, in a way that it was esteemed in the older world. And so because it's not esteemed, it doesn't seem as valued or respected, women will shy more and more away from that just as a cultural experience. And I was wondering about that, about the position of the mother in society and its importance really, because it's not clear anymore. I see like less and less. Anyway, I shouldn't even probably make this comment, but it appears that women are becoming less and less interested in being mothers, in the secular world at least. At least the people I grew up with, it was very much like that. And just a kind of comment about that, or some wisdom about the importance of mother, as a social position, spiritually speaking.
Right. It's not that, it's in general, people are becoming more and more and more repulsive towards accepting difficulties in life. Because see, the term is ashram. Ashram, A means complete and shram means hard work. So the meaning of the term ashram is complete hard work. And nowadays the tendency is to move away from hard work or to move away from difficulties in any aspect of life and to have a comfortable life. And this has also partially reflected in the sphere of motherhood, because to be a mother frankly is extremely difficult, very difficult, and for parents it is very difficult to raise a child. My Guru Maharaj said, in raising a child, a woman becomes old. From young she becomes old, because her entire youth is spent in raising one child. It's not something to be taken light-heartedly. It's a very huge responsibility. And as society is turning more towards having a leisurely life, so definitely they don't want to take any hardships, men as well as women. So in men you see they are very easily deserting relationships, and women, they are left to be single mothers. And so in both cases you see this is general laziness of society. Short and sweet, general laziness of society is being reflected here, nothing else. Now the position of a mother is very glorious because of one important thing. As soon as a human being takes birth, according to shastra, they become indebted because for 20 or 25 years the parents raise that child, and they raise that child for free. They don't take any money from the child. So question arises, is all that hard work for free, or do we have to pay it back? That's question. Shastra says it is not for free. Suppose you hire a person to take care of your child, so that person will charge maybe $100 or $50 or $100 per hour. You multiply that by 365 days and multiply it by 25 years. Just economically, that much is the debt. Financially, that, and emotionally, there is so many debts are there that we carry on our shoulders. And a mother pays back the debt for the entire family, because she in turn takes care of another human being, and she pays back the debt of the family. So when two people enter into a marriage and when they raise a child, they are paying back their individual debts which was accrued when they were raised by their own respective parents. So this is very important to understand from a shastric perspective. You can't escape human life without paying back your debts. That 20 or 25 years that our parents spent raising us, it was not for free, and we should not take it for free, and we should not take it for granted. So this is shastric understanding very clearly. So we are indebted people as soon as we take birth, and we have to do something to get rid of that indebtedness. Becoming a mother or a father and raising one child is the shastric way of paying back that debt. That is the glory of being a parent, and especially Mata Dashagunadhika. Mother is 10 times more respected in Shastra. You see, in Sanskrit there is a rule, grammar rule, Pita Matra. Whenever a mother and father will be named together, the mother will be named first. Mata Pita. It will always we hear mother father. We never hear father mother. Even in English language we hear mom dad. Mata Pita. In all languages, Radha Giridhari. Never we hear opposite. Shri Giridhari Radha. Immediately the grammarians will point out a fault. Why? Because her respect is more in Shastra. Because she is the one who is primarily helping in clearing both individuals of their karmic debts which are accrued because of taking a human birth. So this has to be understood in a very mature way. And if individuals, after taking a human birth and after receiving 25 years of facilities from their parents, if they don't do anything to pay it back, either they take to brahmachari ashram and they dedicate themselves fully to spiritual life. That is one way of paying back their debt, because then they will also deliver their parents. But if they become a grihastha, then there should be something to pay back the debts. So we are not free individuals in living in a free society, although society may be projecting it that way. We are extremely indebted individuals, and Shastra makes us aware of this.
Wow. To be honest with everyone, I only had these 3 archetypes in my original title. We added goddess just to keep some of the shotguns back. But
Jaya.
I had to put it out there because this is called the Honest Man's Podcast, right? So I had to be honest, full disclosure. But that was the last archetype in the title.
I want there was something about Mataji, and this issue has come up that some are suggesting that we should change that address, and that is another contentious issue. Maybe some other time we can take it up, because sometimes ladies say that we would rather addressed as not as Mataji but as Prabhu. So we can try to analyze that from a grammatical point of view, from all different points of view, and then come to a mature conclusion. But maybe some other time.
That would be, I mean, brother, I can have you on every time, because it's like
absolutely,
it's like drinking sugar and getting ecstasy. And I'm sure the audience will really appreciate your wisdom and just learning this on this. Yeah, we wanted to just look at briefly also this goddess archetype. The reason I didn't put it in the original title is because it's less relatable in terms of what we as men would encounter in our direct relationships with the opposite gender in life. So that's why it didn't occur to me originally. But it is one of the most common archetypes encountered in the Bhagavatam specifically. And yeah, I got some comment about that archetype and its impact that is intended on the psychology of those who hear about that archetype.
Can you give an example, Prabhu? So it will be clearer.
Goddess Lakshmi, Goddess Srimati Radharani. And you can see it's very abstract. That's why I didn't put it in the original title, because I didn't know how it would be relatable as such.
Right. So this archetype is primarily for understanding that the Shakti as a divinity is also worshipped within our culture of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and she is given preference over Shaktiman, that is Krishna, in our Gaudiya Vaishnava culture. Ultimately, when we perfect ourselves in the spiritual world, if we are asked a question as to whether we want to become Krishna Das or do we prefer becoming Radha Dasi, so our choice is always Radha Dasyam, that we want to always aspire for the service of Shakti Tattva. The Shakti Tattva has a very important role in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and Gaudiya Vaishnava Tattva is not complete without Shakti Tattva. Shakti is what empowers Shaktiman. So when we are looking upon the feminine as Devi or as Shakti Tattva, so then we have to understand that we are worshippers of, and we aspire for the service of that transcendental Shakti Tattva, who manifests herself as the Hladini variation of Yogamaya, known as Srimati Radharani. We are aspiring for her service, and that is what it is supposed to inspire within our heart. She is considered as our Swamini, as our master, and we are supposed to render all sorts of service for her in the Siddha Deha. And in the Sadhaka Deha, we are supposed to render service to Mahaprabhu by chanting Harinam and associating with the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So that is the simple understanding, because this archetype is not found within the ladies who are sadhakas. So sadhaka ladies are different. This is Siddha. So Siddha is on a different category altogether.
Right.
So this archetype is to be worshipped, and we aspire for their service. That is what it is.
Yes. Thank you for the explanation. It totally vindicates me for my reason for not putting it in the original title. It wasn't as relevant to the central part of the discussion today. It's almost been 2 hours, and I don't want to keep you any longer. I like to bring up the disclaimer made in the beginning that the purpose of this conversation was not to moralize and to suggest how someone should be. It was just to have and try to get an honest, clear understanding of what we're encountering in shastra even for those who would defend it or critique it on either side. So I did see some comments coming up where it's like there was a little bit of an argumentative Bob there. And I hope that wasn't inspired from what you were hearing here directly. This podcast is simply meant for understanding so that you may fairly critique or fairly defend whatever it is that you're having convictions about. That was the purpose. Nor was it meant to be a mansplain. I don't even know if you know this term, Hari Prashad. Mansplain.
Yeah, I know.
We invited Hari Prashad here, not as a man, but as a scholar. Obviously, you can see his scholarship is literally unparalleled. And on Tuesday, we will be having a follow-up podcast on this very topic with a panel of women, which we're also equally excited about. So please don't kill us. Please bless us.
There is one comment: in a family, women after all represent Lakshmi Devi. Can you highlight that comment? Yes. In a family, after all represent Lakshmi Devi. No. In a family, all women represent servants of Lakshmi Devi, not Lakshmi Devi. Mm-hmm. This understanding has to be, proper. This has to be properly understood in a Gaudiya Vaishnava way. In a Gaudiya Vaishnava family, the ladies are Lakshmi Dasi or Radha Dasi. They are not Radha or Lakshmi. So they are in their Sadhaka Deha. They are not in their Siddha Deha. And they should be addressed according to their sadhak identities. So they should not be addressed according to their siddha identities. And sometimes we equate, or ladies should be treated as Lakshmi, and they should be treated as the divine. So we should see that a portion of the divine is present in them, but at present the ladies are in their sadhak bhav, in their sadhak deha, and therefore they should be treated as sadhakas or sadhikas. They should not be treated as Lakshmi or Radha. They should be treated as Lakshmi Dasi or Radha Dasi. Just as it's said often in Shastra that the lady should look upon the husband as the Supreme Lord. But when it comes to day-to-day life, husband is in the Sadhaka Deha. So she should look upon the husband as Krishna Das. Although one should understand that sometimes there is some conception of the husband being the Lord, but the main conception is that of the husband being the servant of the Lord. Same applies to the ladies. So that is.
Yeah, beautiful. I hope this podcast has at least created some more understanding, which was the actual intention of this this thing. Hari Prashad, Prabhu, thank you so much. You've given us 2 hours of your time, of your very valuable time, because I know you do a lot of valuable work in these evening hours for you. It's like, what time is it there now? Like 12 o'clock? Almost 11:30.
It's 11:30 in the night, and Seva time has just begun. So
So for those of you who don't know, he does translation work in his hours after his son has gone to sleep. So you're mind-blowing in so many ways. You're just completely mind-blowing, and we're just so fortunate to have you share your wisdom and share your scholarship. We're super duper grateful. We look forward to having you on a few more times to have further discussions around these sorts of sensitive topics which you deal with so sweetly and scholarly and wonderfully. I hope others can get what we get regularly from Hari Prashad, because we hear from him regularly. It's just like drinking Kool-Aid. When I was growing up, we had Kool-Aid or Kool-Aid juice. Thank you so much.
Yeah. If anybody does not agree with anything that I have to say, then please feel free to express your disagreements. I am perfectly okay with anybody disagreeing with part or entirety of what was said. And finally, Vedic literature, Vedic culture is only for those who have Shraddha in the Vedic statements. If somebody says that I don't have Shraddha in a particular statement, then fair enough, no problem. And as Vaishnavas, we can still have good relationships with each other, because I am not here to dictate anybody's life. I am just here to give what statements are there in Shastra. And therefore, if any statement was made which somebody did not like, then kindly excuse me. But I had to speak what is there in Shastra. I cannot be untrue to Shastra. As somebody who is initiated as a Brahmana, I have to speak the truth. So thank you very much for kindly inviting me.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. It was really so wonderful. Such an honor to have you. I just want to remind everyone, Jai just mentioned, but we have a sort of follow-up discussion coming up on Tuesday with Kishori Jani, who was recently on Namras Prabhu's podcast about women's empowerment. And then Danya will also be joining us as well. So that promises to also be very compelling. We'll address some of the points that came up in this discussion and also just hear their thoughts on this subject matter in general. If you'd like to come in contact with us, please send us an email, ariseheroicman@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram, ariseheroicman, @ariseheroicman. Thank you so much, everyone. It was really lovely. Thank you for everyone's love and appreciation here in the end. Shamla Kishori, Jiva, Marani Vrinda, Vinyasham, CJ Ratana.
Special thanks to Anjali. She was giving notes throughout the entire podcast, so that was
amazing. Thank you so much.
Also, we have a newsletter. You can go to ariseman.net and sign up for our newsletter. We have pretty interesting content coming out of that. And we've been getting nice responses from people mailing and sharing their impact. So that's been super cool. Make sure you can get a follow on us on our podcast platform, as well as Bodhika, wonderful community Bodhika. Make sure to follow them. And you can check us out if you'd like to listen to podcasts on Apple or Spotify, whatever you get your podcasts. And encourage people to come in and join this podcast intended for men who are spiritual in their intention and trying to navigate a world that will swallow them up and leave them for die. Thank you so much, everyone. Hari Parshad, yes.
But next time I'll not be happy simply with a garland, sent online. I would like to have both of your embrace, Prabhu.
Yes, yes.
I'm looking forward to coming just to do that. Hari Om Tat family, thanks a lot. See y'all in the next podcast on Tuesday. Okay, we're gonna end broadcast.